Welcome to Know Your Food, the podcast where we explore the world of food by speaking with farmers, makers, entrepreneurs, and experts who are reshaping how we think about what we eat. I'm your host, Michael Ray Robinoff, CEO and co-founder of Farm to People, and we're recording these conversations live from our warehouse in Bushwick, Brooklyn. In today's episode, I sit down with Martin Ping, CEO of Hawthorne Valley Association, a biodynamic farm in upstate New York and a place that played a formidable role in my adolescence and inspired me to create a business that supports local farmers. Martin has spent decades helping the farm grow into a model of thoughtful, soil-first agriculture that balances production, education, and ecosystem care. He shares the story of how Hawthorne Valley was founded and its focus on educational programs for children and adults, alongside their approach to biodiversity, regenerative practices, and resilience in the face of shifting seasons and changing climates. This conversation occasionally references a film that was screened prior to the recording of this episode in partnership with the Ceres Food Film Festival. The Big Raise follows a regenerative vegan permaculture farm in central France, exploring low-impact farming that repairs soil and grows nutritious food. And all the Ceres Food Film Festival films are available for you to watch for free, sharing stories that highlight sustainable agriculture, food systems, and the people working to make them better. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who cares about regenerative farming, education, and the stories behind their food. Now, here is my conversation with Martin Ping of Hawthorne Valley Farm. Bunch of questions for you, but I thought it would be nice to just share because I think there's no other farm in the world that means as much to me as Hawthorne does, and that it really is because it's probably the first farm I ever saw that I remember seeing and got to experience. And that's really because, for those of you who don't know, I went to a Waldorf school on the Upper East Side. I'm a city boy, and so I wasn't exposed to farms a whole lot. And I went to an amazing school that part of the education was every year, starting when we were in third grade, we would get a weekly trip up to a farm, and it was Hawthorne Valley Farm. And we would go progressively every year through even the start of high school, and we would get a chance to go at different times of year, which was really informative because you would see in third grade, you went maybe in the spring and planted something, and then in fourth grade, you went in the fall and harvested that thing. I remember very clearly harvesting the potatoes that we had planted by hand. We did the harvest with a little bit of shovel, but mostly it's just putting your hands in the soil and digging. And then we harvested all the potatoes and gave them to some other members of our class who worked in the kitchen and literally brought them to the kitchen. And then those were potatoes that we got to enjoy for dinner. And for a city kid, that was kind of mind-blowing, truthfully. And in high school, we had a certain number of hours of community service, and I asked my teacher, would it count as community service if I worked at the Hawthorne Valley farm stand in Union Square? And, he was, I think, pretty skeptical that some 16-year-old was going to show up for free and work the farm stand, and you learn all the different facets of what it takes, which is a lot of work to put on that farm stand each Saturday, starting at really 1 a.m. upstate, which you don't even see. It's like loading the truck and someone getting up before the break of dawn and driving overnight and arriving at Union Square at 5 a.m. and then a bunch of mostly city folks that would meet the truck and unload it and sell for the day and then load him back up, and he would drive back up to Hawthorne. So anyway, it ended up being my first and really only job that I ever held before starting Farm to People. So yeah. Thanks to what you built, I got to get my hands dirty in the dirt and also in a bit of actual customer service while I was there, learning retail, merchandising, selling, counting, inventory, all of the different pieces. So just wanted to thank you for what you've built and how it touched me personally. So talk to me about how this farm came to be, a little bit the backstory, and also, right now we're hearing this, hot topic, which I think it's a great topic and one we should be having, but it's sort of trendy, but I know at Hawthorne Valley it isn't, but this idea of regenerative farming. And talk to me about biodynamic farming and how that sort of preceded this idea of regenerative farming and how that sort of took root, in the founding and in how you and the team of farmers at Hawthorne have really run that farm and what it means at its core.
So it's really honoring a kind of peasant or indigenous wisdom and also marrying it with modern consciousness and modern understanding. And that's just trying to braid the two together and figure it out. And honestly, I would be lying if I said we know how to do this totally. It's not like we're trying to figure it out, all of us. And agriculture for 10,000 years has been a kind of exercise in how do we live in right relationship with the earth, and we haven't quite figured it out yet. So we're working on it. And it helps when people like to eat good food that has quality and taste because it allows us to work on the farm in the way that we want to. And primarily what farmers do is grow soil and then tend the soil, and then hopefully, if we do that well, the soil does the rest.
Totally. And going back to the found, I am just genuinely curious. I was talking to Nina about this before. How did everyone land in that particular 900-acre, amazing, idyllic, upstate New York part of the world and create the magic that is Hawthorne Valley?
Thank you. It's idyllic for me, and it's my favorite farm too. I described the origin. There were about 70 different farms that were looked at between the late 1960s and 72 when the farm was actually purchased. The idea being it needed to be close to New York City and Boston because of wanting to bring school children. They did not choose the farm for the soil. It's very good or marginally good for dairy cows and cutting hay. It's not really great vegetables land, but we've built it up over the last 50 years, other compost that we make. But it's why it was chosen, and Michael can attest to this, and Nina also, it's kind of like in a bowl. It's like we're in a hamlet, and the main campus is 360 acres roughly, campus which is farm and school and store and all the other things we got going on. And then we have another 100 acres on the other side at Taconic Parkway, and then we have a few little satellite pieces here and there, not adjacent but close. So we own about 500 acres, and then we lease another almost 500 acres from neighboring landowners as far as 7 miles away. And this is farming in the Northeast. You have to kind of piecemeal it together because there's not that much contiguous land available. So that's how we landed there and why. It was more like the bowl, this like protective space that we're in is both from other farmers that might be spraying stuff that we didn't necessarily want on our fields, and also kind of just holding the children that come to the farm for their visiting schools programs, summer camps, or again, we have about 320 students at Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School.
Is it also because of the way it's sort of protected, by the hills around it, its own sort of microclimate?
Well, I also paid attention to the gentleman in the film when he said they watch the clouds go by this way and they go by this way. Same thing happens at Hawthorne Valley. It's really, really interesting. We had a very dry year, and oftentimes they'll predict rain, and you could just watch like 2 miles south of us and 1 or 2 miles north of us. You could even see the rain falling, and it doesn't land on us. So there's an odd microclimate that probably starts over in the Catskills or something and just like divides the wind, but it's not always in our favor.
Interesting. Beyond that particular scene of the clouds, were there other things? And again, you've been at Hawthorne for nearly 4 decades, and this gentleman was, more on the last decade he started that farm. Were there things watching him go through the sort of like beginning stages that reminded you of your own experiences at Hawthorne Valley? And obviously a different continent, different country, but.
Yeah, I think that Hawthorne Valley always had it has the educational side, clearly, that's our mission. And it had the production side because the idea is, can we generate the revenue that we need to support the culture that we're trying to have? We're mostly just doing soft cheese now. And because we switched them and started doing more with the fluid milk, with the pasteurized milk. And then we have a bakery, and we have a store which started out with ladling your milk out of the bulk tank and filling your jar, and if we had cheese, slicing off a piece and getting a loaf of bread that was like a brick, and leaving your money in a cigar box. And now we have a full-line organic grocery store on the farm we've had for quite a number of years. We built a new store, and we're still there. We've added on a little bit here and there, but it's maybe 4,500 square feet of retail space, and then the bakery is attached to that. And yeah, it's a nice store. I don't have to go anywhere else. I walk to work, I walk to shop, I walk my grandkids to school every day. Down the path I walk their mother to school on, so.
It's an amazing,
It's a good gig when you can get it.
It's an amazing store, and you can, I recommend everyone go and visit the whole farm, but definitely it's a gem of a store. And I remember when it was literally that one room under next to the barn, and now it's its own structure and building, and quite amazing. You mentioned definitely education and how literally Hawthorne Valley was started as a farm that would bring students up to it to learn. How do you see farming as a form of learning and personal development for both children and adults?
Great question. You mentioned how impactful it was for you to come and visit Hawthorne Valley, and we see this every year, year in and year out. And I know people who were with the first class in 1972, and I know people all the way through the last 53 years that have been coming through that program, and they will all say it was things like it was the watershed moment. It changed everything. It opened up everything. That was so impactful. So it's amazing because it's so simple. It really is. But again, in our busyness of our lives and all the distractions, for some young children, this is about as much movement as they're getting. And to come up and muck out a cow stall when you're 9 years old just somehow makes a lot of sense. And to pull a carrot out of the ground and have this revelation that food comes from the ground. And it just starts. You can see, like if you had x-ray vision, you would see everything is rewiring, and we're remembering ourselves in this larger web of life that we participate in, but that we're kind of disconnected and disenchanted from. So I think it's really meaningful, and it's important that the farmers have this experience every day, and they're in nature every day, and they're working 14, 15, 16 hours a day, but they're in nature, and there's something about that they really appreciate, even with the hard work. And they know they need to open this up. So we try to really make Hawthorne Valley very open, in addition to the children's programming, the summer camps, the school. We have something called Farmscape Ecology Program, which is biologists, botanists, anthropologists, technicians, all working on this question of agriculture and wild nature and ecology, and how do they actually work together, and can we find a way to have a more healthy, balanced relationship as we try to provision ourselves and those who we're bringing food to. So they're really doing a deep dive, and they know, it's 23 years now since we started Farmscape, and they know literally every blade of grass, every insect species, every vertebrate, every mammal. And we are trying to then adapt our management practices to allow for biodiversity to really flourish. And if you come to Hawthorne Valley, or when you come, it will look a lot like the farm that we saw here, which some people say, oh my God, it's so messy. Why is there's like stuff growing all over the place, but not crops. And we have hedgerows, we have riparian corridors along of our streams. We just actually finished a biodiversity trail that was a student initiative from Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School, some high school students. And we worked on it for the last year or so, raised the funds and built it. And it's a 1.3-mile loop through multiple habitats on the farm. And it's a real eye-opener how much is actually going on one farm in like one little portion of the farm. So come up and walk the biodiversity trail. I'll give you a tour.
Wow. I remember, and even like going back to probably, I guess, 2004, 2005, like Sauerkraut Seth and the start of of even creating the whole ferments line, I think was really part of this idea of preservation. It also had the whole, lactic fermentation aspect, but it was really around, from what I remember, again, this is going back to when I was a kid, but this idea of preserving the season as well, and maybe let me frame it through a question about East Coast versus West Coast. You mentioned just West Coast has longer seasons, they have larger tracts of land. You've mentioned a couple times how being an East Coast farmer poses certain challenges, but also maybe certain opportunities. What sort of resilience have you built into the multiple layers and facets of Hawthorne Valley Farm that have allowed you to have an ongoing income and an ability to sort of withstand, I guess, the challenges that come with being a Northeast-based farmer?
That's a really great question. And it's actually, East Coast and West Coast are very similar. If you just drew a line around the rim of the country, everything would be in a certain way, more like Hawthorne Valley and, on the coasts. But once you move in from that, Central Valley, different story, and the whole Midwest, I'm always blown away because I'm trying to puzzle out, how do we do this farming stuff? And then I fly across the country and I look down at these massive tracts of land and, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm talking about. None whatsoever. I'm in this tiny little, barely a microcosm of the whole challenge that we face when we went for this efficiency, one of my least favorite words, and just do monocropping and all the challenges of putting everything in one place. And so we think we have challenges. I don't know how they're going to do it in the Midwest and in places where they've completely ruined their groundwater, and if they even have any left, but what's left is so toxic, and it's a god-awful mess. So we're, in some sense, we're a little better off. Plus, we have this little settlement at the bottom of the Hudson River. You've probably noticed. Oh yeah, you're part of it. This little New Amsterdam and everything going on around it. This little town down here at the bottom of the river, which has the largest appetite in the world, I think. So we're pretty lucky to have the markets that we have, to being that close. And the Hudson River, you probably know, indigenous word is the river that flows both ways. It's actually tidal all the way up to Troy, New York, which is amazing, 131 miles. We're just part of this. It's like living into this natural rhythm because we're bringing food down, we're bringing children up, we're bringing food down, we're bringing capital resources upward. It's just like this constant exchange, and there's something in that, I think, to pay attention to, really. And for folks living down here who want that kind of good access to good food, you need to come up and see what's going on up there, and you need to care for it and attend to it. Attention is a form of love, and we need to all put our attention to this whole challenge and question of agriculture.
I think something that I really want your perspective on, as someone who's seen, I thought that was an interesting thing in the film, was him talking about pine nut tree and how if it survives in that region of France, there's an issue. Talk to us about plants or crops that thrived really, really well or in the early years of Hawthorne that maybe no longer thrive, and then other things that have surprised you about the changing sort of ecosystem and I guess, to call it what it is, climate change, and how maybe there's, I don't want to call it good or bad, but how that has sort of just been surprising over the years about what's worked and what hasn't, and whether you can attribute that to farming or soil systems or just the darn world and earth changing.
Yeah. Well, in many ways, the vegetable growing is better now than it was because the soils are improving. And that's the 40, almost 50 years of adding the manure and building up the soil fertility, retaining more moisture, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also the seasonality is shifting, and probably seasons are about 3 weeks earlier now than they were 50 years ago. We know that also from Farmscape Ecology program, doing a lot of phenology work and really tracking seasonality. But even the seasons you could hardly call them seasons anymore in a certain sense, because you get these really, really dry periods and hot periods, and then you get rain, but it's not like rain, it's atmospheric rivers, and just, it's insane. I mean, farming is one of the most challenging vocations anyone could choose, and it's not getting any easier. And I say to farmers in our region, I don't know how you can stay in it, and almost everyone says believe me, thinking twice. It's just that hard. And then pricing gets difficult, everything's getting more expensive, and people are feeling the pinch, and so they're looking for, well, maybe I have to just go and get that conventional tomato or whatever it might be. And I feel for everyone just getting any food on the table. But I feel so much for farmers. Farmers and teachers are my heroes in life, and I want them to be getting the support that they deserve, because I actually like to eat.
I agree completely, and there are two, unfortunately, groups that this capitalist society seems to completely want to forget and want to overlook, speaking of farmers and teachers. When it comes to labeling and the commercialization of certain labels, I think that's also in some ways led to consumer confusion. People ask us, why is this organic more expensive than that organic? Or why isn't this labeled organic, but it says it's grown organically? Or why do I now need to care about regenerate rock certification or real organic, or all of these different labels upon labels upon labels? And the price confusion that can come from that too. Now Walmart sells organic, but
Your local store.
Yeah, it's you got one in Hudson. And so talk to us about how organic isn't always meaning the same thing, and how conscious customers and how people who want to eat better and want to support the right food can help to differentiate and discern the true meaning behind labels.
It's a really important question, and it's people have to do their homework, because it is a lot of mystery being sowed in this whole, or confusion intentionally. Real organic, you can trust. I really believe that they have integrity. So if it has the real organic label, then the USDA is a little bit less trustworthy. Biodynamic, so certification is a challenge and a problem, and a lot of small farms just can't do it and can't afford it, and it's a real pain in the neck. And so I when I'm shopping, I like to support local. That's my first thing, and I know most of the farmers, so I know how they're growing, and if they can't put as organic or biodynamic on the label, but I know their growing practices, it's fine with me. Biodynamic, if it's Demeter certified, it's trustworthy. You can't mess around with that. It's pretty rigorous standards. So, but I think the question of buying something that's organic but comes from halfway around the world, when I can buy local, that I can actually see the farm right down the street with my own eyes, and to me, there's just no choice. Why would I pay for something that's had to be shipped all the way around the world if I can get the same thing from my neighbor? And the certification or labeling, it's not going to change that. There's too many other inputs and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a false comparison.
It feels obvious, but it's a question we get so often, and especially in the Northeast, where it's really, really difficult to borderline impossible, especially knowing some apple orchards that are balancing a crazy act of needing to survive and make it work as a farmer, but also with a crazy climate and crazy pest population, and trying to be conscious, but occasionally needing to be IPM or do spray to really save their livelihood, but they're spraying consciously. They're not overspraying. They're not spraying for the fun of it. And you meet these people and you walk their land and it smells. And someone just says, but it may have been sprayed or something like that, and so I'd rather get Washington State apples or what have you. And it's just people want for them to give them permission to sort of enjoy what feels good, even though, to your point, walking the land or learning about the farmer gives you so much additional perspective about the why behind things. And I don't think either of us are defending spraying gratuitously, but from what I've learned in my own journeys is that these farmers care so much about their land, and they're the ones ultimately at the end of the day that have to be there breathing, and their teams have to be on that land, and they care about their teams and they care about their soil, and they want their soil to reproduce year after year because that's also their livelihood. And so when you start to learn that history and that thinking, I think it gives you perspective that no one label could ever convey.
Yeah. you all have permission to enjoy your food.
Yeah.
In fact, I really encourage that you do. That's one problem, is we don't actually take the time to savor and enjoy and celebrate and be together and have conviviality over meals. So I would encourage we enjoy whatever we're eating and be grateful for it. I think that knowing, just getting a little bit more familiar, but here's something that bugs me. So I go to shop in my store, Hawthorne Valley, and New York State is the second largest apple producing state in the country after Washington State. And I can buy only one local apple in Hawthorne Valley Farm Store because everything else around us is not certified organic and
That's my point.
blah, blah, blah. And so I can get apples from Washington or Chile, and then I get Threshold Farm. Hugh, he's like the best biodynamic apple grower in probably in the world. And so when I buy apples in the store, I'm only going to buy Hugh's apples from New York. And it just bugs the hell out of me. Like, I'd rather honestly support the farmers down the road who are doing low spray or whatever they're doing and sell their apples in our store. And okay, put a couple of ones from further away, but it's New York, for crying out loud. Let's have some New York apples.
Well, it's so interesting because that was the sort of, I guess, concession that we made at Farm to People was we beyond one farm in upstate New York that grows organic apples, everybody is IPM and then for us on our team it was like, let's go talk to these like, no way are we gonna just support Washington State farmers, not that they don't need our support, but
we love them too.
We're gonna get them from upstate New York, and I got to meet Josh at Fishkill, and I got to talk to just a lot of farm who often have a little portion of their farm that's carved out and is organic, but when you talk to them, and some years they spray very little, and some years they need to spray more, but it's all about just trying to maintain, again, their livelihood, which I think on the human level we can all kind of, I think, certainly understand.
I don't spray my apples in my garden, but I in my little orchard on my house, but I often don't have apples as a result. It's a royal pain in the neck. You got to go out there and pick all the bugs off by hand all summer long. And last year I did, and I was religious about taking care of the orchard. And I had the most amazing crop of apples. And I went away for 2 weeks, and the squirrels ate every last one. Effing squirrels, I'm telling you. I like biodiversity to a point.
Yeah, and then we don't even need to get into it, but that brings up a whole other point, which is like on-farm labor and immigration and all the other things about how expensive it is to run a farm and to tend it, and the current political everything that just makes it.
Yeah, so just Hawthorne Valley has been an educational farm, so we have our core staff of 6 full-time farmers, and then we have an apprentice program, which we've always had. And so we have half a dozen, sometimes more, sometimes less, young people living on the farm, learn, and they stay for a whole season, and then they can stay for a second year and take on some intensive projects like self-study on their own. And then lately, a lot of them have not wanted to really leave, so we've been hiring them. But it's, it requires that much labor, and honestly, people's lives have changed. This is another interesting thing, having been around for a long time, that people are way more adept at carving out kind of what they call work-life balance. It was a new concept for me, but I say that, but I'm kidding, because my work and my life have always been the same thing. I'm one of the lucky people on the planet who have that privilege. But for young people who are coming to Hawthorne Valley, it's just, I'm going now, and well, but we're not done. Well, but I have to go because I have the next thing that I'm doing in my life, and that's important to me. And we have to honor that and respect that. And so we have to actually adapt and change. And then they changed the labor laws in New York State so that you can't work more than 40 hours without getting overtime pay. And I totally get it. And nobody wants to abuse anyone, especially farmers. But when you talk to the farming community, are you kidding me? Nobody. There's not a farmer that anyone knows that works 40 hours, and then you're going to go over on that on top of the zero margin that you're already making. So yeah, farming is, I tell people, by the way, I'm not a farmer. And I always say I'm not smart enough to be a farmer. You got to be a Renaissance person to be a farmer. And I'm just a person who supports farmers. But sometimes when I say I'm not smart enough to be a farmer, if a farmer's sitting next to me, they'll say, "We're not dumb enough." But I don't really ever think that. I think farmers, if you need to be like a climatologist, a soil scientist, know how to market, know how to, it's just like one skill set, a mechanic, just on and on and on and on. I could never do that.
For sure. Yeah. No, that's really so well said, and I think such a core thing I try to share with our team internally at Farm to People, which is really like farmers have the hardest job in the world, and we need them desperately. And so how can we at Farm to People create a new tool and a new way of distributing and making it easier for farmers to do what they're great at and what no one else can really do, and get that food to New Yorkers in as affordable and as convenient a way as possible, so that it really can rival the big guys. I won't name them, but we already named Walmart, but you know.
A good point on this. So people will say, we're trying to support all the farmers in our region. They have shelf space in our store. We don't put all of our vegetables in our store. We have other farms in our CSA shares. And it's really like an opportunity and an intentional collaboration. Or we take some of our farm apprentices, will start their own farms, coworkers who move on, and we very much support that. And people say, well, are you worried you're supporting the competition? They say, that's not the competition. This is part of the network, and we have to be a network. We have to be like lots of smalls that can mimic a large. We don't want to be a ginormous, like the less bad version of everything else we see out there. So we need lots of smalls, and we need to be mutually supportive in this kind of cooperative web. It's these larger Walmarts and the Amazons or whatever they are that are your organic local neighborhood store. It's like, sure, I'll put some of that on my field and see how it's just something that the bulls make.
I think thank you so much again for being here, Martin. Last question, and I think you've given us a picture of your life and how you eat and what that all means to you, but a question that I like to ask is, what's your food ethos when you go through your life, and how do you teach folks who come up to the farm, and how do you teach your family when it comes to being a conscious consumer and conscious eater? How do you think about that?
How do I teach them?
You don't?
No, every day's a school day. I'm learning. I learn from especially my grandchildren. I teach grade 12 economics. That's my only subject anymore, and I love doing it. It's just so much fun. But it's really dialogic. It's just being in conversation with young people and talking about the state of the world and not sugarcoating anything. They're really kind of inheriting a hot mess, but also telling them about Farm to People, or telling them about Sachem in Egypt. I had Helmi Abulius zoom in from Sachem to my class last year and give the students a picture of what Sachem is doing and how they're transitioning all of agriculture in Egypt to organic and biodynamic. And just so then the students, Mr. Ping, we hear all these stories of people that say they're going to do things, but nobody's actually doing it. Or if they start something but they don't finish it, now we see people actually doing it. So they need to have hope. They need to see as many inspiring examples as there are, and there are many, and that's my privilege. I get to know and meet the cool people in the world who are doing the good work, and I can bring a little bit of that back and share that. And I mean, we have to be kind of in the business of hope, especially when we have young people sitting in front of us.
Well, thank you. I got to speak to one of the coolest people in the farm world, and one of the coolest people in the world that I know and have looked up to since I was, very, very small, and will continue to look up to you and the work that you and everyone does at Hawthorne Valley. So thank you for being here, Martin, and thank you for joining us at Farm to People.
Thanks for listening to Know Your Food, a podcast from Farm to People. If today's conversation got you thinking differently about what's on your plate or where it comes from, we'd love if you shared this episode with a friend or left us a review. It helps more people discover the folks reimagining the future of food from the ground up. You can shop from our network of small regenerative farms and makers at farmtopeople.com, And stay in the loop for live events by signing up for our newsletter or following us on Instagram at Farm to People. Until next time, eat well and know your food.